New Heights Educational Group, educational resources to help reach your goals.
This podcast is brought to you by Silicon Valley High School, the world's fastest growing, video-based, self-paced, teacher-supported, fully accredited online school that's recommended by more than 96% of students. Take individual courses at just $95 each, or earn your high school diploma at any age. Check us out at svhs.co.
Welcome back. This is your host, Buffy Williams, and you're listening to the New Heights Educational Group, the New Heights Show on Education. And tonight's topic is K-12 grading system. And I just talked about some of the experiences that I had as far as grading in elementary and high school, and also what is the thought process for parents now and thinking about alternative ways of grading, or educators out there, alternative ways of educating our students on what is the best way to determine if they have actually retained the knowledge and the skills needed in order to be considered an expert or have learned the qualifying learning points within their particular classroom or curriculum. And so what is the understanding of the actual subject and the process by which we go through teaching those students what is success or performance in this particular area? And we don't want to oversimplify things, but we want to look at and explore the value and the utility of the knowledge that students are learning, and seeing if they can be creative thinkers, and also be curious about the subjects that they're learning about, and then be able to transfer that information and that learning into the real world. So this can be a step in the direction of maybe looking at alternative ways of grading. And there are some out there that I had not heard of before. One of the first is that it's one called Gamification. And it's basically when students are given tasks to encourage them to participate more in a particular subject. And then feedback is given verbally or written immediately following the project. And so it's kind of like a live scoring. There's no letter grade or number grade associated with it. It's just feedback. And it could also be audio recorded and also put into a system similar to the system that the parents access now for their actual grades, but it allows the parent to actually look at the feedback that the teacher is giving the student. And it's an alternative way of giving grades on the spot for the student, but through verbal or written feedback. And then there's one called upgrading, and it's called upgrading because there's a grade, it reiterates, and then it replaces. And so basically what the student does there, it's kind of the traditional way that grades have been given, but then the student is given an opportunity to revise it and then gradually improve until they actually master the course. But this works better than just the current grading system, because the current grading system, the student takes the exam, they get the grade that they get, and then they kind of move on. But the upgrading means that you keep doing it over and over again until you master that particular thing. And so the grade is only used as a jump start to the revision process for the student. And then the next one is always on proving ground, which means there's a building block. So it's more, I would say, kind of like a demonstration process, but not in the form of a test. So the student actually demonstrates whether or not they can actually retain the knowledge. And then it's a building block situation. So once they resolve that, then they go on to the next thing. and it's the building situation. And there's one that's very similar to that, and it may help you better understand the always proving ground, which is a continuation. It's called so what now? And to give you a way to understand that, it's like you give the student the information, then the student asks, so what did I do to summarize the details and get the big picture? So why was this work important? And then what now? What is the logical next step in this assignment, idea, or topic? And so those two are kind of similar to each other, and it gives the student the opportunity to build upon their learning based on those perspectives. And then there's one that's called standard-based reporting, which is pretty much subjective, but it's much better than actual just letters, but it's more of giving grading with numbers versus a letter grade. So you always give them a number grade. And then that's one that's called action reflective narrative. And this particular one, it's more of a reflective process for the student. And so it's based on reports and observation. So the student is given the information, but they are given feedback based on reports or observation of their learning and objective within that course. And again, this is not a letter grade when it comes to this one. So there's no letter grade associated with it. It's only the student demonstrating through reports and actual progress that the teacher then gives feedback. And then there's one that's called the digital portfolio, which is not highly recommended, but this particular one is it focuses on the highlights of the student. So when the student does the work, this one is more arduous for the teacher, because the teacher has to look at all the work that the student does and pull out all of the best things that they've done. And then they actually put together a portfolio, a digital portfolio. And again, this is kind of subjective for the teacher, but it tasks the teacher, because then the teacher has to design, okay, what goes into this particular task, and then assign it some type of value, and then manage and organize the grading. And so it's not the best system, because it's very taxing on the teacher to be able to do the digital portfolio and then kind of extract what the student has done best throughout the year or throughout that particular unit, and then using it in a digital portfolio format. And so that's one other alternative grading system that teachers or educators have put out there as an option. But this is just brainstorming. These are just educators brainstorming different ways of looking at the grading system. And then there's a pass or fail, which is not highly recommended within the K through 12 level, but definitely recommended sometimes on the college level. And so there's a pass or fail. There's nothing in between the the A to F. You either pass it or you fail it. So the downside to this one is that there's no alternative. And then there's one called P2P, S2S, or mentor collaboration. And that P2P is peer-to-peer or student-to-student, or there's a mentor collaboration component. And this one I actually prefer and like in a way, because it gives the peers an opportunity to talk with the students, and it's more unit-based for the student. And so within this, they plan out a project and they work with diverse peers across multiple school areas and multiple school locations, but they work as a unit, and then they are grading each other based on the work, or they can actually have an outside mentor, which also could be a teacher, to collaborate with them in the learning process. And so there are no grades associated with this or point value, but they work as a unit to actually work through a rubric and assign what's the best fit for a particular assignment. Then there's the final one, which is called publishing, which it is what it sounds like. Students actually do their work and they publish it. But a lot of people have a lot of concerns about the privacy of this particular one. And with this one, actually, they recommend that this could be done not necessarily all the time, but just with certain projects throughout the year. And everything can be posted anonymously, but it also allows for the families, the parents, community members, and other peer students to be able to make post comments about whatever the project is. And this, they say, is designed to kind of allow the work to kind of take on a life form of actually implementation into the world, like it's a real world experience. And it gives their peers an opportunity to collaborate on the revision process and also gives them feedback, which can be negative or positive based on the work level or the performance level that the students have put into the project. But it tends to, over time, improve students' knowledge, and it also creates a visual resume because they've been able to publish this information, and then at a later time they can actually claim their work once all the revisions are done and they have it into a more of a perfective state. And so it's an alternative to grading, but it's not recommended as a tool for grading every project, for maybe like major projects. But overall, I think these 12 alternative ways of grading are very interesting, to say the least, because we've been using the A through F grading system for a long time, and I think that maybe we can explore alternative ways, but I think in some way it'll still be tied into the A through F grading system because it's easy to understand. Parents understand it. For the most part, if you make anywhere from like a 93 to 100, you get it. Well, a 92 to 100, you get an A or something like that. And then they know kind of where you fall if you got a B, if you got a C or a D. The main thing is factoring in, I think for me, is D passing or is D failing. And so when you have students that struggle within that particular numerical bracket, I think that it's more important to be distinctive about whether or not they have retained the information. Because one of the cons that in the article they were reporting on, the researchers were saying that when you give a student a letter grade, that the parents, all they know is that the student is passing or failing. It does not actually relate to the actual content of what is the student failing in. And so with the alternative 12 forms of grading systems, what the researchers are proposing is that in addition to giving a student a grade, is there a way for us to be able to, us as educators, to be able to extract what is it that the actual student is missing within this particular subject area? So this student is failing in factoring. This student is failing in multiplication. This student is failing in understanding the main idea versus just giving them an overall grade so that the parents can actually understand what is it that we need to actually work on. And so I think in some ways when we were in school, if we were struggling with that particular area or a particular sect of something, that the teacher actually wrote that out in their own personal handwriting on the report card, which I do kind of miss because it's actually something that you can treasure throughout the years because, your teacher actually took the time to actually write out your comments or whatever to your parents. And so we're exploring K through 12 in the